What are things that, when shared, they grow instead of you losing out? Like if you have a cake and you share it with somebody, you get less cake. But what are the things that, when sharing it, they tend to grow and they don't really have a price? We're obviously talking about love, caring, sympathy, positivity, all of these beautiful things that you really cannot measure in terms of monetary value. Yet, how often do we see them in everyday life? How often do you see people look you in the eye and smile? A kind word, a gesture of positivity, sympathy, encouragement, all of that. I would argue it's way below than what we need as humans. And that's why when you walk out into the world, you see so many people that look sad, unhappy, distressed, um, and not full of life as we should be. I mean, every day is a blessing after all. We should rejoice that we're alive, we're well, relatively speaking, because all of us have got some issues going on. Um, but we should support each other and the whole community around us by being positive, supportive, and just creating an atmosphere where people can, number one, survive and then thrive. This brings me to the point I want to talk to you about today, which is sympathy for the unseen issues that people have. Now, it's a twofold question. Number one, that is, when people have issues, it could be the responsibility could be completely on them, or it could be just bad luck or something that's out of their control. But that's a different topic. Um, my question is more about when we have issues on the inside that don't necessarily show on the outside to other people that we're dealing with. And because people can't see them necessarily, and they don't know that if there's something about us that seems to not be right or we're struggling, that what every human being would need in those circumstances is sympathy, is somebody to, yeah, show compassion, be there in whatever small positive angle. The reason why I bring this up is you might have somebody who is, let's say, on the extreme, they've got cancer, but it's on the early stages. You don't see it on their face or their physical appearance. Somebody might have some sort of other physical or emotional or financial or whatever sort of a problem that might be very profound. It might be life altering. It might be, that they've got 6 months to live. Um, and when you don't see that on the outside, but on the inside, you have a very tough time, then it generally heightens the sensitivity towards what happens on the outside. So if on the inside you're struggling, but people don't see that, when they treat you particularly positively or negatively, without you earning any of that, that generally speaking has a disproportionate effect on you, despite you might say, okay, I'm stoic and it doesn't matter what happens on the outside, but yet it does. I had my share of this um, from the beginning of 2020 until for about 2.5 years, when I had a very bad spell of insomnia. And when it comes to the responsibility of why that was, I put it on myself because I suspect I had COVID-19 in December 2019 when I lived in Brussels. And where I lived, it was very close to the Chinese embassy. And the building where I lived in, there were plenty of Chinese that lived there. So deductive problem solver might say, okay, these people who work at the embassy, they were also living in the same apartment building. I came across them in the hallways. I caught COVID-19 because I had a strange kind of flu for a week or two. Never had that before. And the recovery was super slow. So I didn't know what it was back in the day. But anyway, so before I had fully recovered, I went to do some grappling in the 5th of January in 2020. And I felt already at the warm up, I'm probably 15-20% down physically. Like I wasn't myself. I could feel that I'm not performing to my normal capacity. But yet I continued because there's this ethos as you don't give up, right? And when it came to rolling, I got smashed. Um, and it was it was something I never felt before, except for when I was like 3 years old and I drowned almost. So couldn't breathe, couldn't catch my breath. So I was like, something's wrong. But yeah, the brain said, well, I'm not somebody who gives up, so I didn't. And it was a rough training. But then I went home. I was like, oh man, something's off. And in the night, couldn't sleep. I was like, okay, what's going on? Like you get tired, physically you get tired, but then that switch that you fall asleep, it doesn't exist. And you're just tired and that went on the first night, second night, third, fourth. It went for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. And I was like, you know that you're getting to a point where you're starting to break down because the body is, I mean, they're under stress. I mean, there's cortisol all over the place. And when you're under such stress physically and you're tired, like you're really tired, but that switch is not there, you can't fall asleep. But yet I went every second day. I went to the gym, ate healthy, tried to just maintain normal life, and I did my job, all of that. But I knew that if this continues for a longer period of time, I will die, and there's no way around it. At the same time, I refused to take any synthetic drugs that would give me a certain chemical sleep. I thought that's not the solution. Generally speaking, I'm not a fan of drugs anyways. So as long as I can avoid them, I will. But that went on for several months that I could not sleep a single minute. And so it's kind of like if you are a regular person, you probably could free dive, let's say 3, 4, 5 meters deep, perhaps 6 or 7. And then you're like, oh man, there's pressure and I can't go any deeper. And you're like, wow, I did 7 meters of free diving. That's pretty deep. So people who say I've had a white night, so they didn't sleep a minute or a second during one night, they're like, I'm so tired. Now, it's kind of like the world record free divers, they can go to 100 meters or 150 meters. And a normal person would just simply not be able to do that. They die because they haven't practiced it. When somebody says they're tired, they haven't slept for a night or two, or they've been awake for 60 hours or whatever, they're like, I'm super tired. Look, bro, all I can tell you, like, if I haven't slept, I didn't sleep for like several months, like 3 months with 0 seconds of sleep. There's levels of how tired you can be. And it's both physical, that your body in every cell, you know that you're full of cortisol, you're tired, and mentally also when you're up the whole night, there are levels. It's kind of like somebody who has never run long distances. They try to run a marathon, they probably get blisters and their legs can't hold up after, like, let's say 10, 20, 25, 30 kilometers. And then you've got these ultra marathon runners that go for 300 kilometers. Then you say, how is that physically possible? But yeah, there are levels, right? So I know what being tired is. Like 3 months without sleep at all. That's what tired really is. Um, but on the outside, when I took pictures of that time of myself, it doesn't really show that much on my face or the physical appearance. So people didn't see that I was struggling. I was in pain, both physically, like on a constantly, I was in pain. Like every part of my body was aching. I felt 10, 15 years older, and mentally it was very taxing. Um, and but people didn't see that. I was still performing at work. I still went to the gym, although I could lift less. And mentally also, I was keeping my shit together. Um, and in those moments, when I was kind of noticing the world around me doesn't give a damn, um, it kind of narrowed the periscope in a sense to the point where anybody who would show unwarranted sympathy, support, positivity, some constructive element in their behavior towards me, I grew very sensitive about that because I noticed that that barely exists. Now, granted, I don't have family or that much of, let's say, a pool of friends in Belgium because I was there only for a few years. Um, but that taught me a lesson of people might have struggles inside their lives, either physically that you can't see, or on some other level, financially, mentally, regardless of if it's self-imposed and you are responsible for it or not. I think what we need as a human species is to have more sympathy and empathy, or I would say distinction between sympathy and empathy is that you can empathize, that you can put yourself in their shoes. Like let's say a woman has postnatal depression. I cannot empathize. I cannot have kids. Doesn't matter if I identify as a woman or not. I cannot have children. So I can sympathize with them in their struggle, but empathize, no. Or somebody who is, let's say, retired and widowed. I cannot empathize. I'm not there. I can only sympathize with them. But still sympathizing with them, being a positive influence. I think we need more of that. For example, where I live right now, this building has got plenty of people that are kind of senior citizens. And not very surprisingly, because it's a Western country, a lot of them are alone. They're widowed or divorced or whatever. When I see them on the hallways or outside, um, they seem a little, I wouldn't say depressed or sad, but they seem a little lonely. So just realizing, recognizing that, I very eagerly, when I see them, I say hello, I smile, and a lot of time, I notice that a lot of times they want to stop and talk to me. Nothing particular, but just to get that human connection. Because not many people say hello to them. Not many people look them in the eye and actually recognize them as a fellow human being. It's the same thing as wherever you go, whatever you do, whoever you come across, even if it's the cashier at the store. Look them in the eye and say hello and say thanks and be kind. We don't know what other people are struggling with. And even though if you're struggling yourself, be that voice of positivity. Because while you might be struggling and we're all selfish to a degree, the world the world doesn't revolve around us. And the more we recognize that, the more we can be an influence that creates a positive world around them. The more we will alleviate the pain and suffering that is unavoidably part of the human experience. So my takeaway from this is sympathize with the people around you. Even those that might seem like they're doing well in their life and they got their shit together and they're on top of their game, they also struggle. But maybe you just don't see it. So show sympathy. Be a change for good. Anyways, that's my 2 cents for today. Have a good one.